Hi, everybody. This is a podcast where real doctors discuss fake medical situations. That means that unless you pulled a hamstring at a waffle party, this podcast is not medical advice. If you need medical advice or medical care, please contact your doctor. Also, this episode covers a suicide attempt that happens within the show that we're discussing. If you're not comfortable hearing about that sort of thing, the conversation occurs about 32 minutes into our episode and finishes up at about 44 minutes. And there will be a warning right before it happens as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jackson Vane.
I'm Johnny Kolasinski. You might remember me from such podcasts as Please Enjoy All Podcasts Equally, a podcast review podcast.
All right.
It's rare that I actually make you guys laugh with
This
it.
was a for real
That's pretty
laugh,
good.
not a pity
laugh.
Yeah.
This is Hi Everybody, a Bad Medicine podcast where we talk about what Hollywood gets right and wrong about medicine and how the body works. You can find this podcast online on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Hi Everybody MD or by visiting www.hieverybodymd.com.
You can also call us and give us some more, ideas or give us feedback at 530-DOCTORB. That's 530-DOCTORB. The B stands for brain chip, which I think works well for this episode.
Yeah.
Did you just come up with it?
No, I wrote it down.
Okay.
I was very
Innie
impressed.
came up with it, and he just found it.
My innie did find it.
It got past the code disguisers. We are going to be discussing, as you might have gathered,
From the
Severance.
episode title.
We are from the episode title. We're discussing Severance, the Apple TV show that is just phenomenal. Normally, we focus on one episode of a show. This time, we're calling out a couple things specifically from Defiant Jazz, but we're going to be talking about the series as a whole. So, spoilers for all of it. I do want to introduce someone who you probably already know if you listen to this podcast. With us this week is Dr. Greg Winter.
Hey, what's up?
Hi.
Everybody.
Hi, everybody.
There we go.
Hi, everybody.
For once, normally I open with, Jackson, why did you pick this? But I picked this.
Yes, you did
And
pick this.
Jackson, why did I pick this?
Because you said that I should watch the show and I doubted you the whole time. And then I finally watched it. And then I did the whole experience at Comic-Con where I became an innie myself and had a blast and very much so enjoyed the show.
Sounds like a personal problem.
I mean, I am now my outie. It is okay.
Yeah.
I have not receded into myself, nor is my chip on.
You are a person.
I mean, my innie is a person in theory. They have their own life.
You and Heliar disagree.
Yes.
I think what Johnny said is important, that there's no way to talk about this without significantly spoiling it.
Yes.
And I think if you like sci-fi stuff, this is a show that's worth watching. You might as well watch it.
If you go to work, it's a good show.
That's true. And actually that brings up a point. I was talking about this over the weekend, and part of it took me a while to get into it, and the person I was talking to was like, "Yeah, but you like your job," and I like, that actually makes a big difference. Like, I do remember when I didn't like my job, and this would have spoken to me in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I think if you've ever had a job for working for a corporation, especially one that tries to get you to kind of drink their Kool-Aid of like our corporate lifestyle, and this is what we do here. It's just like, but I'm an employee. I don't care what you do here.
And I had to talk about this like at work too. Like, how would doctors serve or work as an innie and an outie kind of thing? Your memories are severed.
Your memories are severed, but your skills are not.
But is medical knowledge skill? Or
That is a
memories?
great question.
Right?
That I guess goes into.
You could be empathetic, but that is.
I mean, mine is as anyone who knows me knows, my skill set is from training. It's not memory, right? Like, I'm not an empathetic person, but someone taught me how to. And I'm good at it because someone took time, and I took time to learn it and go through techniques and stuff. But like,
you cared enough to learn, but you didn't care enough to care.
If only you were the first person to have said that.
I mean, my job, I need to know a lot of stupid things. I mean, I'm sure like knowing how to sew and all that other stuff is probably intrinsically in me now, but like, would I know if someone showed up with some kind of medical disease? Can I dig that out from my memory, or is it like something that I had to just built into my skill set?
That's a really good question.
I think that's the thing the show addresses very well by you have no idea what they're doing. They don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They're certainly doing something.
Yeah.
And like any job, at some point you're like, oh, okay, I can do this. Like either you can do it or you don't work there anymore.
Yeah.
But like they are doing a task. You can identify the rote portions of it as like, hey, you're looking at numbers. Also, at some point, those numbers are going to make sense to you in a way that you have to do something about them.
Yeah.
But you have no idea what it is.
Right.
And they have no idea what it is. So I actually don't think your skill set, I mean, like.
They do give them a handbook, though, to learn.
I think the basic.
I have it.
I think the basic tenet of it is like your ability to communicate, your general, like they show up to work dressed. They're not confused about going to the bathroom, but like, no, their skills are not there. They're not even their personalities are not.
Can you
really
imagine if they
same.
were like baby-like, like, what is this stuff coming out of my body?
Yeah. I'm curious, though, as to in future seasons when we see more of this, are we going to see more skill focused, like Bert, Christopher Walken's character? They're obviously creating or restoring or doing something with that art.
Yeah, but you can train anyone to do that. I think you,
Fair.
and I also feel that you can train anyone to do almost any job. Are there different levels of intelligence? Yes, but if you have a willingness and ability to learn, which everyone has an ability to learn, I think you can be trained to do almost anything. I think, of course, there are limits to that, but I've always especially felt about being a doctor, it's like so much just repetition, like.
You put your reps in. Like,
Yeah, you gotta actually do it. You gotta study and do stuff. For some people, that's easier, but I think anyone can do it if they have the motivation to do it.
Yeah. I think that is a fair kind of thing to say.
Like,
I just wonder.
I did some Bob Rossing over the pandemic.
They all had like various things that they learned how to do. I think that's probably why we haven't seen other departments yet. There has to be like a health department down there, and you wonder if those people are severed or not. And I'm sure that'll probably get touched on future seasons.
And I have a hope because I think that this ends, the season ends in such a way that makes me want to watch more. I hope that I hope it doesn't become cliffhanger.
Lost.
Right. I mean, just write a good story and do it, and you can ruin anything by digging into the minutia of it. The thing that to me made Star Wars good sci-fi was that they didn't try to explain stuff. They have a story, and you can fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
But like this is something where I think if they try to fill in those blanks, it's gonna ruin your imagination. Your imagination of it is better than anything someone's gonna write. Because we all have had experiences in an office.
Because eventually you get midichlorians.
Right, exactly. Because eventually you have midichlorians, and somehow Obi-Wan is both 90 and 35.
He ages well.
I did see a picture of Alec Guinness at the age that Obi-Wan was supposed to be, and he basically looked like Ewan McGregor. So that checks out. But that's not the focus of this episode, so I'm going to kill that tangent from myself right now.
You're going to kill a tangent from me?
No, that was my tangent I was taking.
I'm fairly certain that all I'm good for is tangent. If you would like to take a tangent class.
Send $1 too. So I do want to talk about, before we get into like keep going on the general severance process, I want to talk about some of the medical things that we did see, starting specifically with the process of being severed, with the implantation of the chip. Mm-hmm. That's something that happens pretty early in the show. We see it in the second episode, and it's an outpatient brain surgery where your boss is watching. How was that seen as far as medical accuracy goes?
Depends on what they were doing.
Yes.
As far as a haircut or like a dental procedure, that's fine.
Actually, you make a good point there too, because normally if you're gonna do any kind of surgery in the brain, don't you want to shave the area?
Well, and there are actually different. So now, especially with brain surgery, they try to do as little of that as possible, because it turns out that the less you make someone look different, the quicker they recover. And I mean, a responsible person that was going to sit down and talk about a subject would have looked into a thing. but there are better rates of recovery for brain surgery for people that have less area shaved and for people that like they have less cutting into their head. Like the smaller the incision or the smaller the drill hole, the smaller the manipulation, the less haircut. Like all those things add up to better recovery.
Yeah. But you would imagine, like, if you're going to cut into some area, you want to keep it sterile. So you got to get rid of that hair because that hair is not sterile.
Yeah, you can wash your hair. I mean, you're right. But I mean, so the goal is you do, instead of like shaving everyone's head,
Just
they
shave a patch.
they shave.
She's
patch
got
of
long hair. She can hide it.
But there's some interesting things for me, at least, that came up, which is like, this, you pretend that this is kind of near future, right? Like it's not right now. So maybe they're doing things differently in a way where it's just like, oh, this is, we have sterilized this in a way that's acceptable.
We wipe down the hair.
Right. But like drilling into someone, and we talked about this when we did our Comic-Con panel recently, plug for your show. But like they drill into her head, they don't really do anesthesia. And in truth, you kind of don't really have to do a lot. You have to do topical anesthesia, but your brain doesn't have nerve endings in it. Yeah, so you that's right. It doesn't have pain receptors.
It has nerve endings. In
gonna,
fact, the brain is a whole bundle of nerves.
I'm going to walk back on that. Your bundle of nerves called your brain doesn't have pain receptors in it. It does have nerves in it, or has neurons in it. And so like the fact that she's not necessarily feeling pain is not it's not super wrong, but not showing them do a topical anesthetic.
Yeah.
Also, like you could drill into someone's head kind of quickly and you could maybe just get through, like you could destroy those skin receptors pretty fast and being that the bone doesn't, the bone could potentially be tender.
I mean, the bone can hurt because you break bone and it hurts, and it can still feel vibration and stuff like that too. So that would still hurt.
One of the things I was thinking while it was happening is there are these things in medicine that are hard to explain. And one of the big one is like our sense of smell is really tied to memory. And when you smell something like burnt skin or body discharge,
That's a nice way to describe
it. I tried.
Body discharge.
Or like bone heated up to the point that it's powdered. Like that's a specific scent.
It's a roasty, toasty smell.
But it's a thing that you smell it and you've never smelled it before, but you will smell it again somewhere else. And it really makes, it's like, what it is.
What is that smelly smell that smells of something?
It's the next big thing from Yankee Candle. Is bone drill. Bone saw.
I will say, like, the first time I smelled bone drill, it's a very specific smell. Yeah. Like, no amount of mask will cover that up.
But I mean, there's a lot of things like that. Like, there are a lot of smells like that in medicine. Like,
pilonidal cyst.
Yes. So that's like infected hair, basically, right?
Like, it's like an ingrown hair
to the nth degree
above your butt cheeks.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the ones that I think about is like GI bleed, like bloody digested stool has a specific scent that when you smell it, when you're somewhere else where it shouldn't be, when you're like walking down the street and you smell it, you're like, oh, something bad happened.
You know, the title of this podcast should be, you should be happy you can't smell this. I'm trying to think. Rotavirus, horrible.
Sever your smell.
Oh, C. diff. Like, there's so many special smells that we all learn as.
And I think
medical professionals.
So in my particular specialty, I see a lot of weird things that have to be normalized. And one of the things that I think that is not a skill, but is like, I just don't have a great sense of smell. I just don't. And so there are times where I have been talking to someone who has literal tumor growing out of their body and we're doing like a dressing change or whatever. And I'm holding on a normal conversation and I turn around and look at who's helping me and they're like gagging in the background because it smells so bad. I just can't, like, I just don't smell things as well, which is good for me.
Lucky man.
But it's also like weird. It also means I clearly am missing a bunch of other stuff that I'm supposed to be smelling.
Yeah. And for those who are new to the podcast, Dr. Greg Winter is a palliative care doctor, which is hospice.
Yeah, I do hospice care. So I work with people who are are significantly ill, often with cancer, in their last days of life, last weeks or days of life. And so some of the patients, especially, I work in an inpatient setting, and they have significant wounds or tumors.
I wonder how many Yankee candles there are in that place, just to really
Zero. We cannot have candles. We cannot have scents.
What about coffee grounds?
The thing about that is, I would like to drink coffee later, and
So you don't want to,
and so you don't
associate
you don't
that
want to do
smell.
that.
Yeah, that's true. Coffee grounds do cover up the smell of things pretty well.
We did have a guy recently who's got some. He has ostomy bags, which means his bowels empty to bags on the outside of his body, which is actually probably more common than you know.
I said, "Oh God," because I know what ostomy bag can relate to.
But the thing is, like, we work in a hospice home, so they make breakfast for us sometimes. And if I am there early enough, which is rare, sometimes I also get breakfast. But we all had eggs, and then I was examining this guy who also had eggs. They were just kind of like in his ostomy bag as the same
As
thing.
eggs.
How were those eggs? Pretty good.
It's what,
Look like it.
And and also, like, that's one of those normalization. I mean, that's actually a learned skill, right? It's like, this is normal, it's okay. And even though I can tell the story about it, it didn't bother me then. It doesn't bother me now.
Yeah.
I kind of want some egg.
Can I go back to the cutting of the scalp?
Yes.
That, we always say there's not enough blood. There was definitely not enough blood in that whole scene, because I get so many patients that like land on their back of their head, and just like it's like a bloody murder scene, and there's just so much blood that comes out.
Your scalp has a lot of vasculature. It's very, I mean, you are feeding all your hair follicles.
You're feeding your brain.
You're feeding your brain.
And I would assume the only way it wouldn't is if you inject it with like lidocaine with epinephrine, that would constrict the vessels. But so much blood. But then also you kind of think, how do they repair it so that they don't know? Because usually the go-to for us is staples, because it's faster. I mean, you can do stitches.
I mean, but in this, they didn't cut in, right? They made a burn.
No, they made small cut first.
They cut first, and then they had the spreaders, and then they drilled.
Spin drill. I mean, I think you can get away with the amount of blood that they had. I think later on they have an appropriate amount of blood.
Yes.
During the bat to the back of the head scene.
What did you? And then Johnny said, like, you were reading more about the chip being inserted.
Yeah.
Right?
And that the location of the chip is right above the amygdala. I believe it. I don't recall specifically. I don't have that note. If it was to separate the hemispheres or not.
So there are surgeries that separate hemispheres, and they use that for like seizures. And the thing that separates your hemispheres is the corpus callosum, which is just like a bridge of nerves almost. So if you have really bad seizures, what they'll do is they'll just cut your brain in half, essentially, by cutting the connection through, so that the electricity doesn't propagate through to the other side of the brain, so you don't have a full body seizure. But the amygdala itself, I had to look it up, is in charge of emotions, not memory.
There's a great Batman villain, Amygdala. He doesn't have control over his emotions. He also doesn't feel pain.
But I think the chip placement, if you're really trying to get rid of memories, would be like your hippocampus.
Where is that compared to where we saw it?
Sides.
Where is that in comparison to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind?
That one requires a lot of shooty bang bangs to like zap out memories, if I remember correctly. You have to put like basically a Jiffy Pop on top of your head.
I was going to go with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Eraser? It's not Eraser.
Not End of Days.
The Mars one.
Total Recall.
Yeah.
Oh,
like that little.
Oh,
arc.
you ruined the thing I wrote down that I wanted to talk about.
Oh,
Please do.
Well, so I think there's a big conceit here, which is like sci-fi MacGuffin. We're gonna put this in your head, and now you're separated.
Sci-Fi MacGuffin's my neighbor.
That's a great name. But there are people that are doing things like this. So Elon Musk has a company that's trying to get FDA approval for putting
Neuralink.
Yeah, for Neuralinks. There's a company in Australia who did get approval for human trials. I know Elon Musk's company they've had a lot of success with their pre-human trials. They've also killed a lot of monkeys or chimpanzees, which are very different. I just don't know which one a better person would have researched. But there's also a really good, I want to say it's not This American Life. It's like Reply All or one of those other NPR shows where like somebody is using it's not Neuralink technology, but they're using brain stimulation to make themselves better at specific tasks. And so like this is a
Like the
legitimate
Matrix?
Yes, but like for real in real life at this time, in fact, years ago, so probably even more advanced. And so like these are things that are kind of happening, and it it sort of made me think like the next step in this is this potential, separation where you don't ever have to do the things that you don't want to do, right? Like another part of you can do that. And in Total Recall, his buddy basically says like, don't fuck with your brain, pal. It's not worth it. And yeah, that's like, be real careful with what you're doing to your brain. You do not know the consequences. Also, Total Recall is amazing. We should do a show on Total
We should.
Recall.
We could do 2 shows because there's 2 of them, but
we
only
sh-
one
we
counts.
should
No,
just
it's
do
just the
one.
So, so the location then you think is not.
It wouldn't sever you.
I mean, the other thing is when they do that side shot and they show it going in, you can't place an object in 3-dimensional space in 2D. So you have no idea even where they're placing.
Yeah. We use like the closest thing I can think to that is like a fluoroscopy. I mean, you can do like a moving MRI, like a live MRI, but you're not going to be able to do it with the whole like tunnel around you. But you can do it with like a C-arm, and you can tell if something is moving in the right place, but it's not going to be that much
Was the
resolution.
C-arm like a robot?
C-arm is a fancy way of saying it's a C where one end has a receptor and one end shoots out the radiation. So you can actually put that around whatever you're trying to image and get an idea of how it's moving. So they use it for certain procedures like reductions of fractures.
It allows you to get in places where the patient can't be moved quite as much.
It's a live X-ray.
live view,
is a kind of a nice way to say it. It's like a full motion X-ray that's just constantly going. But
Yeah.
the amount of radiation you get from a whole procedure, like a 10, 15-minute procedure, is probably as much as you get from a transatlantic flight, is what I was told.
Yeah, there's a lot of safety protocols in place for that when they are using a C-arm or a fluoroscope. So the fluoroscope is that's the similar thing, but that's allows them to see when they're trying to realign bone. And those are the procedures where everyone will be wearing lead suits.
Mm-hmm.
You're covered up.
Yep.
Trying to make sure that you don't mess up your regeneration.
You don't mess up the tingly bits.
That's a better way to put it.
But yeah, so the scene that they did, it was very, very high resolution, the way they kind of inserted it in. And, this could be like near future, like Greg kind of mentioned, but current future, it's really hard to kind of do something like that.
It was just too high resolution for.
It was very high resolution.
It looked really nice, but also I think that's one of the interesting things about sci-fi medicine in general is like things like that are becoming so much more accessible and common. Whereas before, I think I even talked about this in one of our live things where like if a hospital bought an ultrasound probe 20 years ago, that's a $20,000 piece of equipment. Now you can buy an ultrasound probe that hooks up to your phone
For like 2,000.
It's less than for sure less than 2,000.
It's a subscription fee that is
That's where they get you.
That's really how they get you. I've actually looked into buying one.
You gotta buy the subscription to the ultrasound gel.
Correct. Yeah.
And do you want a warmer? Of course you want a
I
warmer.
mean, yeah. No one likes cool gel.
But that's the thing. Like the sensors and the computing power is so different. Like it is orders of magnitude different, and it's actually the hospital is now behind the times. The hospital has the crummy machine with a CRTV or a cathode ray monitor instead of like your phone, which is high definition where you can zoom it, where you can flip around. It's like the hospital's behind the times, but also they can't upgrade
because they
of
shelled
the
out
investment they put the money in.
Yeah. And then one other thing I want to mention.
Let's start a hospital.
I mean, what? We're going to make a movie kind of like We Bought a Zoo?
I was going to say, it's like We Bought a Zoo.
Except we bought a hospital.
You know what makes people really likable? Owning hospitals.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they made a whole show about that. It's called New Amsterdam.
A ton of money, though.
Yeah. New Amsterdam is a show about people doing medicine their way. Oh, God. I can't wait to watch that one with you.
Let's not do, or let's do that.
I mean, yes. The last thing I want to mention, though, about this whole scene before we move on is Greg mentioned this, too. They really leaned into that drill.
Not to the same extent that they did in House.
No.
So I'm really hoping that Johnny is able to post our episode from Comic-Con this year. But in it, we talked. There's a what is that from?
It was from House.
Is it from House? Yeah. So there's a scene in House where someone's doing a burr hole like that and
Remotely.
He's given it a lot of pressure. He's really leaning in, and even House makes the joke like, if it goes out the other side, you've gone too far. Like, yeah, that's once you get past the skull, everything in there is real soft. You can't push on it.
I mean, that's why a lot of times there's guards to prevent you from drilling too deep too quick.
I mean, they have that when you're drilling into your ceiling.
Yeah, I was going to say, not like a lot of times. For sure, when you're drilling into someone's skull, unless you're in a crazy emergency where you don't have a drill with a guard on it for drilling into someone's skull, there's going to be that protection there.
Yeah.
Speaking of protection,
I don't know where this is going.
this is going to security.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The other medical moment, or one of the other two medical moments that we wanted to discuss was the murder of Mr. Grainer.
Yeah.
With a baseball bat by a doctor whose name begins with an R, who I cannot recall. Who's the one who originally came up with it and performed the severance procedure.
Yeah.
Jackson, that's one that you brought up as wanting to include.
Yeah. It's one of those particularly violent scenes, I think, that kind of actually looked realistic. We always talk about head trauma and how it would shut you down pretty quickly. This is one of those where she really went for it, and I think there was a correct amount of blood. Even Greg, I think, who we just rewatched the scene, he goes, "Oh, that's enough blood."
Yeah, yeah. We were talking about what it means to cut into somebody's scalp, and you look at that scene at the end after she hits it. She hits him 3 times. She also hits him hard.
Yeah, she leans into it
with an aluminum bat. There were some good clinks. Good job to the Foley artists there.
And I mean, it's interesting because this show is generally not violent. Like, there's a lot of weird, surreal stuff happening, but that's kind of a moment of pretty explosive violence. And the aftermath of it is upsetting, as it should be. Like, if you do that to somebody, there are consequences. There's a lot of blood on the floor, and Adam Scott's character, like, I don't know which one he is.
He's Mark.
It's things are confusing. If you haven't seen it, you shouldn't still be listening. But like, he's upset, and you would be upset. It's blood. It probably a cracked skull. There would probably be brain matter. Like, our bodies are designed to protect us, but also, you can only protect so much. You can only protect so far.
Yeah, and a bat is pretty good about breaking through the skull. There's
almost specifically designed to do damage to a rounded object.
Yes, correct. But when they were pulling him, like, there was a proper trail of blood kind of going through there. I'm a little more surprised that there wasn't more blood on anybody. Everybody came out pretty clean, all things considered. And I do find it kind of interesting that they said, don't vomit. You're going to leave your DNA there.
I mean, he's going to leave his DNA there anyway, but vomiting would leave more DNA.
More DNA there.
Yeah, and you'd know that this is probably what we want to test.
I mean, I'm happy he's not a fainter, because that is a very real response to someone who sees that much blood. And I've seen that more times than not in my emergency department. I'm sure Greg has dealt with.
Nope.
No?
No, but nobody faints in the hospital. Often their trajectory is one of awake for a little bit, especially when some family member comes by. People kind of get this second wind a lot of time. But then afterwards, they may be asleep for days, and that it can be kind of frustrating for families to see that pattern. They're just like, well, he was just awake yet. Are you giving him too much medication? Blah, blah. This is a conversation for a different topic. But that's a big topic of trying to understand what is normal for people at the time, at an end of lifetime, because they don't have that experience. And also, it's not like normal, it's not normal interactions. Like, they only have a little bit of energy, and they used it. So that means for the next 3 days, they might not open their eyes.
They got to reopen.
Would you say that it's not like what we see on TV?
I say that so much of the time.
Yeah.
Someone should do a podcast.
I try. This is. I'm trying to repeat myself less, so do the podcast as much as possible.
That is fair.
Can reach a slightly wider audience.
And then speaking on the effects of stress and all that other stuff for using all your energy, he does eventually vomit.
Yeah.
Until when
He just holds it.
Yeah, he holds it in. Strongest, like probably gag reflex of all time.
I mean, but that's another thing. It's like we talked about that in another episode where people are asking about, or maybe it was during the
Panel.
question and answer period where people were asking about adrenaline, and like that can be a big deal. Like you can normalize things in the moment, and then you get a chance to relax, and that's when things can hit you. And that happens with trauma a lot. That happens with really emotional things a lot. You know, people can be real decisive and strong, and then 10 minutes later, when everything calms down, that's when crying and sobbing and there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's how our bodies are designed to work.
You compartmentalize for a little bit, and then when it finally hits, it hits.
Or if you're me, forever.
Or if you're severed, also forever.
Not forever. It's just while things are
Just for
going
8
on.
hours a day.
Exactly. But yeah, that was one of those scenes that I remember watching, going, "Oh man, this is pretty darn accurate." Just
It
the way
felt.
they're acting.
I mean, and
No weird body twitches.
the standard Hollywood body twitch.
Yeah, thank God there was no.
SHBT.
Yeah, and I've seen that. Like, I've seen that many times on TV. I will never see it in person, mainly because they come to me much
it's too
later.
late.
The only kind of body shaking that happens after a head injury is like just seizures.
Yeah, that's a type of twitch.
Yeah, but
Now you're splitting hairs
yeah, but it's a long time twitch.
instead of splitting heads. I was trying. I was making the joke before. I'm not proud of it.
No, you shouldn't be. Take it back.
I will not take it back. I will not step back a joke.
Do we want to move into the kind of the other thing, medical technical thing that we wanted to cover before I have a lot of general questions about severance as a thing? But we also discussed the this is in end of episode 4, beginning of episode 5, Heliar hanging herself in the elevator, and this is another one, Jackson, that you brought up as something you wanted to touch on.
Yeah. It was a pretty dramatic scene, and like it kind of goes to show, and I think Greg mentioned this before we recorded, was, you know, she was carrying on her day very well, and then she took a cord and then tried to hang herself. And that whole scene was pretty dramatic in that point. Looked relatively realistic, save for like, it's a messy way to die. It's not like this. It's not this clean way that people think that people go. It is much more traumatic in general.
As someone who doesn't run this podcast, I think we should probably say there's a suicide hotline out there.
Yes.
And if this is something that disturbs you, you should probably not listen to us talk about it.
Yeah.
But there's a new suicide hotline number. It's 988 instead of 911. I didn't even know that until
very recently.
I don't know, 10 minutes ago before we started recording.
You should definitely use that if you need help.
But also, talking about suicide does not make people want to commit suicide. In fact, that's part of our training, is to talk about if people have plans, and if they do have plans, to actually discuss what it is instead of pretend like they're not going through that crisis, because to ignore that problem does not address it.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, you don't listen to something that's going to bother you. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also going to talk about it.
Yeah. Johnny probably will insert a timestamp.
Yeah.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. Skip to Johnny's time here.
If you don't want to hear this conversation, skip ahead to about 44 minutes now.
That being said, this is also our second time talking about
Suicide.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. At least.
I think. Well, we did that Seinfeld episode that was almost exclusive, right? That was
We did Midsummer too.
Oh,
everyone
yeah.
should watch Midsummer.
Yes.
We
I mean,
you
it's
know
a
what?
really good movie.
Should we take a break and watch Midsummer?
I don't know. I feel like everyone should watch Severance, by the way.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
Actually, you should really watch Severance if you haven't. It's so good.
Oh, man, Mid-Severance would be a great show.
I would watch Midsummer.
Back to suicide.
Back to suicide. Oh, man.
I think that it's very interesting that before, like, you know, the whole time they're trying to convince her character to, like, hey, just kind of buy into what we're doing, and you will see that it's going to be okay. and then she kind of you see that attitude change, and it's like when people are really depressed, all you want is for them to have that attitude change, right? Like that's what you are hoping for as their friends, but sometimes that's not necessarily a positive thing. It might mean that they have made up their mind about some things, and so like then they are in a better mood
because they know what's next.
Yeah, and I think I'm saying that because it's important to be like if you have people in those situations, or if you're in that situation, you have to recognize where you're at, and just because somebody suddenly feels good doesn't mean
everything's honky dory.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you should still be your concerned self, and also it's not always helpful to just always be asking somebody what's wrong, but just because someone suddenly feels better doesn't mean everything is perfect.
Just because someone suddenly presents themselves as feeling better.
Thank you for the qualifier.
But yeah, this scene itself, though, it kind of reminds me of like one of the first patients I saw. Like, it was a person who was hanging for quite a while. They did not look as clean and neat as Helly did when she was finally cut down. Like, there was a lot more ligature marks on the neck. There was a lot of bursted blood vessels in the eye. Blood was coming from the mouth because there was actually trauma inside the neck, not in the lower abdomen, as we usually see in movies and whatnot. And she was already kind of waking up when they took her down, which definitely does not happen that quickly.
Well, and it's also this, it's a show. We don't know the time frames, but still,
at least one elevator ride.
Yeah, up and down.
But you have no idea you don't know if that elevator door just closed. Like, you have no idea what happens here. This is sci-fi nonsense. Is it 10 seconds? Is it 2 minutes? I mean, in truth, you see that when she kicks over that garbage can and puts the full weight on herself, like suddenly she's not in a comfortable place. Growing up watching the movies that I've watched and enjoyed, you see a lot of violent stuff. One of the things that gives me a visceral reaction is like hanging, but it's not somebody hanging. It's like
the sounds.
No, it's the seeing of a hanged person in silhouette. Like that just gets. I don't know why. I've never.
What about Homer like batting a light bulb? It's the only thing that makes me feel better.
That doesn't bother.
Okay, just making sure.
But like, so you see her do that. It reminds me of Shawshank Redemption, right? Where what's his name, Buddy?
Brooks. Yeah,
Brooks does it. But like the scene of Brooks doing it doesn't bother me. It's the scene of the shadow of Brooks. And it's like, that's the finality of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that often is not addressed in any sort of violent depiction of anything, is the aftermath. Like you see the action of it and like, oh, somebody did a cool thing, or like, oh, he ripped his arm off. But it's like, the still person bleeding out, like that's the thing that gets
the opening scene of Midsummer.
Actually, yes.
It took. I mean, I think I said it during the episode. It took me like 6 times to get through that to get to the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it is. It's like someone who's dead, and you're like, not good.
So as far as Jackson, you said that she opened her eyes. She was okay. She didn't come back to work that day, did she?
No, she went to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then she, I don't know how many days it was. They didn't really make it clear. And then she eventually just showed up, which is it has to be like this really dramatic thing.
We also don't know what day it was. It could have been a weekend.
Correct. So she could have been gone for a while. But the whole like waking up again after your severance chip turns back on and then seeing you're back at work, you're like, oh, fudge.
I mean, I wonder what her Audi, because her Audi has to know. Clearly, it's even more than that. Like this is a huge spoiler. If you haven't seen the show, stop listening.
Right.
Yeah.
But like her Audi is so complicit in the plot of doing this to make this a viable thing for whatever their purposes are later. Like, oh man, my Innie hates this so much that she tried to kill me.
Herself.
But also I'm going to be like, well, you're going back in. Like,
yeah, they're still going back in. It's nuts.
I mean, maybe that's why her Innie is so depressed in the first place, because that's a shitty way to feel.
But maybe she didn't praise Kier enough. Praise Kier. You need to watch this show.
Yeah. If you're this far and you haven't watched this show, I'm impressed with your dedication to us, and we need a Patreon.
Yeah.
I will say there's some podcasts I listen to where they're like, spoiler alert, but also you should watch this, and I'm like, I'm probably not gonna watch this. And I'm like, I should have watched it. Why did I like these people's opinions enough
that I trust their judgment.
I'm listening.
I know exactly which podcast you're talking about too.
I listen to a lot of shit.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, moral of the story, I have none.
Moral of the story, she probably would have been worse off than she was from what we saw and the time frame that we can assume there was between her going up and then Mark finding her at some point.
She should be not doing well. It's kind of like the knockout theory where if you get punched and then all of a sudden you're like fine again. This is not one of those things where you're going to be fine in a day or two. It's going to take some time for you to recover. Your brain did not get oxygen for a long time. It's long enough that she passed out.
I mean, and I also think there's in Hollywood and TV, they often get this wrong, which is why we're talking about it, is that like people can be dead for a while and then they're going to be okay. Like you have about, I mean, you get like a 3-minute no oxygen window and then you're brain dead. Yeah. And it doesn't matter what we do. Sometimes in certain situations, people do recover from that, but like 3 minutes without oxygen and you're dead.
Yeah. Your brain no happy.
Luckily, the Severance chip also has an oxygen.
It has a 28-second oxygen.
They planned ahead.
Yeah.
But that's the thing you see a lot where like, you know, people get choked or people are underwater or something happens and you have these miracle recoveries. There's the thing in Ocean Beach of somebody getting rescued on the beach and like they get their CPR and like that guy's breathing again, but he's clearly not alive anymore. Right?
He's
like,
not in good.
Yeah.
He's not in a good condition.
And you know, that's the difference between being awake and the difference between being alive and being awake and having meaningful function, right? Is very different.
Yeah. It's like how much of your full brain is still okay. If it's just a brain stem.
And I watch a lot of true crime stuff and listen to true crime stuff, and it's always interesting to me that it takes about 3 days for people to like miss you enough to check on you, but like you get 3 minutes before it doesn't matter anymore. Yeah.
So wait that extra day, folks.
Call people every 3 minutes. So the only way to stay alive.
Text them incessantly. That's the only way. Yeah. That's the worst medical advice I've ever heard of.
This podcast is that I know at the beginning it said, boop, boop. This podcast is not medical advice.
And then this is definitely one of those times, I would say.
But again, new number for mental health issues, which is probably good because calling 911 for everything is not great if you're in a crisis. So 988. And I also think it's worthwhile to know the poison control number. Jackson, do you know it?
1-800-222-1222.
He's an ER doctor. Of course he knows it. So, yeah.
And if you're digging in your yard, call 811.
Yeah. That's actually a really good idea.
Am I good to say that this is, if you did skip ahead, this is a good time for me to drop in this is a good time moment?
Yes.
So cutting off that line of conversation?
Yes.
Cool.
Okay.
So, and so I've got another line of conversation. It might be a little bit rough for folks as well, so just putting it out there. But and it's one of the reasons, Greg, I said, hey, you need to finish the series so we can talk about it on the podcast. And that's that Mark specifically took the job because he wasn't able to handle work because of his grief over his wife dying suddenly. And I think I know the answer when I ask, so, hey, Greg, do you think that cutting out your life for 8 hours a day is a great way to cope with grief?
I think I told you I didn't want to be invited on this podcast for a relationship talk. No, I mean, clearly, and also I think that's one of the interesting conceits of the show is the fighting in the universe about it is often
about people wanting their autonomy to deal with their problems in the way that they want to deal with them, and then the people that are their loved ones in their life to be like, this is not a healthy way to deal with the thing that's happening. Everybody deals with grief in their own way. There's no perfect way to do it, but there are certainly unhealthy ways to do it, and like avoiding.
He should just drink like a normal person.
He does that too.
Oh, he does do that too. Oh, but like not addressing the issue means that you're not addressing the issue. You can't move forward. And our culture and our society hates the thought of what therapy even means. To mention therapy means that you
weak.
are a loser and weak. But also, if you're in therapy, you're probably not murdering your wife and children.
Yeah.
So there is a healthy balance.
I mean, I always tell people like going to the emergency department for help because you feel sad or suicidal doesn't mean you're weak or crazy. Unlike what like family members and whatnot have told you, this is not true.
I mean, remember, part of the reason why you're in the ER is because of the shit your horrible family members say to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are some really good things happening in the realm of mental health when it comes to access because of things like, online therapists. It allows you to have different access. The problem is or at least the issue that I think is not talked about is that therapy is not a quick fix. It takes time. It takes time, and it also means you have to invest in it your own time, and that can be really, really tough when you're in a not great place. It is totally worth it, but also you have to know that you can start that investment and realize this therapist isn't good for me, right? And that can be hard. Because if you're going to a therapist, you're in a vulnerable place, and to say, I still want to go. I want to move forward with this, but not with you is hard. But also, a good therapist knows that. Like they're not every therapist is for every person. So, I say this to people a lot about primary care doctors. Is like, if you're not going to listen to your doctor, you need to find a different doctor. Not every doctor does things the same way, but if you can't even follow their instructions, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So you have to find that balance of a person who you respect, that you like going to, that you're going to do their follow-up, and you're going to at least try to meet their goals. And that's not every single doctor. I mean, I don't listen to Jackson.
I don't listen to Craig either.
I don't listen to this podcast. So.
Well, yeah.
So avoidance bad.
Yeah.
Avoidance bad. Severance good.
Severance good.
Severance good.
Praise cure.
Praise cure.
And in an interesting way, I mean, I also feel that family always, anyone that is in your world always thinks they have the answer. And for the most part, the answer is really be supportive of your loved one. Like if they're going through some tough stuff, your advice doesn't matter unless they want to hear it. They probably just kind of want to hang out and play video games and podcasts and so stop telling people what you think they should do. What you think doesn't matter, says me. That's what I think, which does matter.
Yeah, Mom.
Listen to what I say.
I've got a couple more questions I need to ask. But before I do, is there anything else that we kind of want to touch on, talk about?
You should really watch this show.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of really if there's anything else.
I really enjoyed it. I had read some articles, and it's very weird because being at Comic-Con with you guys, I have this. When we have gone, I get to that point where I'm like, oh, I hate this. I hate all of these things. And Severance was like a thing I read about and was kind of, it felt like sci-fi up my alley. But then watching it, it's a little bit slow to start with, but I think it's totally worth the investment. And if it's a thing that you heard about and thought maybe you want to see it, I totally think it's worth.
Just give it some time. Yeah, I think everyone after Johnny told me to watch it, and I've told other people to watch it. Once you get through like the first 2 or 3 episodes, you're pretty much gonna finish this series in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think there's just enough like surreal silliness in it that can pull you through some of the more
Hard
not even
sci-fi.
that it's not that it's like none of it is serious. It's interesting. It's just it was so not what I expected, and I actually think what my friend said, like, oh, you like your job, like that made a big difference. Like that's right, I do like my job, so I can't like I'm not jumping into some of the irony of this, and but I think most people probably don't like their jobs, which
So
is
that's what
very
would make
sad.
this work. Yeah.
I like the childlike aspect of the innies. The fact that, okay, they are they are fully grown adults physically and to some extent emotionally, but at the same time, like you can see that Mark has a little bit of childlike wonder sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I also do have a question. The Human Centipede marketed itself as 100% medically accurate. If that's the case, how medically accurate is Severance, the Apple TV series, as a whole, holistically? Please rate all episodes equally.
I mean, I really like things that are like right now potentially plausible science. Like, is this feasible? Not really, but like, maybe. I don't know what's going on in a real laboratory with stuff.
But the human centipede can occur right now too.
But I have more problems with the things happening in Human Centipede and the pace that they have. I mean, like,
It does happen pretty quick. Happens.
I
Over
mean,
an hour
so
and 30 minutes.
I would say if the Human Centipede is builds itself as 100%, I'm willing to say this is 110% medically accurate.
You know, I actually wrote the same thing as you did.
The creator, by the way, says that the show is 100% mathematically accurate.
I'm sure those numbers are real scary.
Yeah, well, math and medicine are not the same.
Jackson, why do you say 110%?
It's more medically accurate than the human centipede. I mean, I have like problems with how they did the chip being placed in and just where it was near, but for the most part, like we're near future. This is technology that doesn't exist yet.
I mean, so in truth, it should be 90% medically
No,
accurate.
but the hanging and the bat scene really drive it up because it's definitely accurate.
Yeah. It's
More
kind of
so.
it's right on the cusp, and that's Human Centipede is also right on the cusp.
We're gonna see people walking around on their knees, taped butt to mouth.
But will they be severed?
I mean, that's the only way
they're gonna wish they were.
you took us down.
Yeah,
this
you
path.
I did take us down this.
Don't-
I thought we had it wrapped up pretty nice.
We did.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, ooh, the human centipede.
Yeah.
Now we're all screwed again.
The premise of the show that you do every time. Why would you do that this time?
So yeah, like if you haven't watched Severance and you listen to all of this, watch Midsummer.
Actually, if you listen to all of this and haven't watched Severance, I also want to know why you put your dog poop in a bag but then leave it in the middle of the alley. 'Cause it feels like you're half doing something. You're so close to completing it. Just put it in the trash.
It's not even in the alley. It's tossed next to a full
It is
can.
on the lid of the garbage
Yeah.
can. So with that, folks, I want to thank you for listening. As always, want to encourage you to watch Severance if you haven't already. Want to encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends about it because that's the best way that people hear about podcasts. Thank you, as always, for listening. Thank you, Dr. Gray Winter, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson Vane, for
Good to be here again.
for being here again. Praise care.
Praise care.